So good morning. Of course, Thanksgiving food isn't what this sermon was about, but I sort of felt like for the kids, we didn't really need to get into martyrdom. They could go without that. Is that a good call? Was that a good call? Let's probably leave it at that, yeah. But here we are in the famous martyr story that we have of Jesus. It's a story, as I said, also about how endings are as important as beginnings. Starting next week, we will journey to the manger, and we will see how it all began. Jesus' origin story, as you will. Like that? Like that movie reference? So we're getting the ending. We know how it ends, and we'll get to be reminded of how it begins. And as you know, Advent is my favorite time of the year. I love the coziness. I love the nesting sense of Advent, where it's like we're preparing ourselves and our hearts for something beautiful and new to come. And even though it's not new every year, hopefully in our hearts it is new. And so it may seem odd today that the Christian lectionary gives us the crucifixion, but it also gives, like I said, added context to the Christmas story, where we are reminded that compassion and cruelty are at odds in almost every moment of our lives, and they are there at the beginning and they are there at the end. Jesus' parents are the epitome, I would say, of compassion, and we meet them in the coming weeks. The world that Jesus entered into when he was a baby was the epitome of cruelty, right? Jesus and his family have to famously flee and become refugees from a cruel, tyrannical ruler in Herod, right? We hear all of that, we remember all of that. And so the reminder of endings is how we face these moments, whether they're our final moments or they're obstacles on our way or the pain that we experience in our lives. How we approach those things shows us what we're made of, shows us who we are. And as I said, today is Christ the King Sunday. And we use that language specifically, not because God is only king. I also jokingly say queen sometimes, of course, but because we are in a moment where we need to be reminded of what the stuff our leaders are made of and where we should put them on a pedestal. And in this story, we actually see a crown, right? We understand that a crown is there. Now, it is not made of gold or jewels or anything like that. What is it made of? Thorns, right? It's a mocking crown. It's a joking crown. It's an unserious crown. And you often find that people in charge of people who do cruel and terrible things often mock, right? Often are cruel. So Jesus in this moment is powerless. His body is not doing well. He is surrounded by cruelty, and that is an understatement, right? And cruelty, the word, ultimately derives from the pre-European root word, which meant to cut or to tear. So cruelty in its origin as a word, it means to cut or to tear. Or another origin word of it is to grind or to pumice or to put away, right? Dismember, dismantle, cause pain willfully and with malice. And the other word we're juxtaposing today with it is the word compassion, which of course at its root is with and pain, right? So compassion is with, I will be with you. Passion in the root of it is pain. So in the pain, I will be with you is what compassion means. Passion draws you towards someone in pain, and cruelty pulls you away in the moment of pain. Cruelty tears us apart, literally. It's tearing our country apart in many ways. It tears us from our own humanity and tears us apart certainly from other people. And again, it's pain with malice. And compassion joins us together, helps us keep our own humanity. It helps keep us closer to the suffering of others. It is pain, but used for a purpose. Not that we should glory in pain or lift up pain, but we should have a reality that exists where we acknowledge that the world is a hard place. Pain will happen. People will experience loss. Difficult things will happen. Injustice will happen. And it's how we approach those things that matters. And these two states of being, compassion and cruelty, are perfectly seen in this story. The soldiers, the state executioning him, are cruel and mean. The crowd, his family, and his community are there to show compassion and care. And so in front of him is the example of both those things. And he's in pain. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in pain, I can get a little snippy. Am I the only one? Like you're in pain and then you're just like, whoa, get away from me. Ooh. Or I'm just not feeling well. Ugh. And so Jesus is in this moment, this crucible moment, where his body isn't in a place he'd want it to be or anywhere would be. And he's faced with these two crowds, the mocking, cruel crowd and the compassionate, staying with him crowd. And so what does he choose? You know, he could call down angels with a vengeance upon the soldiers. He could call for those witnessing to take up arms and persecutors, right? He could call out to those people who are witnessing and they would do something. And interestingly enough, he does neither of those things. I don't think that approach is for all time and for all things, but I think very specifically in this story of Jesus, we are to understand that no matter what unfolds on earth, that God is a God of compassion, that compassion is always the choice. For the crowd of meanness and ignorance, he sees past their misunderstanding and their mistakes. He wants them to find compassion in God so that they will find their own humanity again. He sees the people that are the meanest as the most broken. And wouldn't you say that's true still? The people that lash out the most, that are the meanest, tend to be the people that are broken. Something has torn within them. Something has broken within them. And so instead of meeting that with his own tearing and breaking of them, he sees their humanity. They are broken and he wants to repair them, to realign them, to redeem them. And for the ones on either side of him, the criminals, right? They didn't cause his suffering, but part of me, whenever I read this story, Jesus is in a lot of pain. Whenever I read this story and the guy mocks him, I'm just like, dude, I'm busy here. I'm in pain too, right? I'm in pain too. You know, why are you coming after me? But Jesus doesn't respond that way because he knows that these people didn't cause his pain. And he knows that they're probably in a system that was unjust anyway that, you know, got them in that moment where they are being, you know, persecuted as well. And so instead he makes a promise that there's a better place beyond this cruelty and suffering their experience, and they will meet him there. We all experience pain. Again, maybe some more than others, maybe some of us, which is why Thanksgiving is helpful and why I use the way in with our children today to just remember to be blessed, that you're blessed. If you have a home and it's warm and you have family and friends and you have a good food on the table on Thursday, those simple things should remind you that you are blessed, right? You are blessed. So we all face pain, some of us less than others, but we will all face our mortality at the end. And the question here is, how will we face it? One of my favorite spiritual movies is the movie Gravity, of course. Have anyone seen that? It's about a decade old, so if you haven't seen it, I'm going to give away some of it, and you've had your chance, right? But it's a movie with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. It's a movie in space, right? And the reason I like it is because one of my favorite Oscar jokes comes out of it, where Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, Golden Globes, they were hosting the Golden Globes, and they jokingly said, this movie is interesting because basically the plot is George Clooney would rather push off into space and die than hang out in a space with a woman his own age. Terrible. It's not really the plot, but I always find that really, really funny. So anyway, it's been a decade, so I'm going to ruin it for you. You're welcome. And truthfully, George Clooney's character, in a beautiful way, does sacrifice himself for Sandra Bullock, who is the main character. Sandra Bullock's character is called Dr. Stone, and she is the one that's the central pivot of the story. And the story is about how one faces mortality, how one faces trauma and difficulty, and how it shows us who we really are. Like in death or the face of it, our life can sometimes get more clarity. And so we meet Dr. Stone in space, as you do, right? She is fixing a mechanical problem on the Hubble Space Telescope. She's going through the motions, and you can sort of see she's doing her thing. She's very good at what she does, and she's kind of checked out, and she's kind of going through the motions. And you realize a little later that she is living a life of shock and grief. Her daughter passed away in a terrible accident, and she still carries that grief with her. And so she's on the space station sort of like going through it. Technical job, she can look at it and kind of figure it out. She's looking down on Earth, which I would imagine, very few people have ever seen that position of Earth, but she seems unimpressed by it all, right? She's just kind of like, oh, whatever. She's sort of meh about it all, unaffected, in the way only someone who has been in pain can be checked out, right? And then tragedy strikes, Again, it's a drama, so it's not just her floating in space, musing on herself. Tragedy strikes. She's on her spacewalk, and urgent sirens blare because in the process of the Russians shooting down, it's always the Russians, right? Shooting down a defunct satellite nearby, so nothing malicious. They shoot it down, as we have lots of things in space, and the orbiting debris comes into their field and causes catastrophic issues with their shuttle. It kills everyone else on board. The only two people left are George Clooney, who I don't remember his character's name, and Dr. Stone, who's Sandra Bullock. And it happens, and they have to go in and figure things out. But the problem is, once something hits an orbit, what happens? It keeps going. So they have this field of debris that caused catastrophic damage, and it's going around the Earth, and in about an hour and a half, it's going to come back again. So there's this looming sense of like, what is going to happen? And so they fight for their lives, and they figure out like how to get through this, what they need to do to their next step and their next step, because the shuttle won't get them home. So they need to figure out how they get to another space station, right? And in the moment of it, after he sacrifices himself to get her to the space station, you see this moment for her where she's sort of like, this is tough. I don't know if fighting through this with my limited skill as a space pilot is good. I don't know, maybe this is it, right? Maybe this is it. I mean, it would be so much easier not to fight this, not to fight this. The odds are against her that she will survive. She's the only one able, again, to get to the International Space Station, which has already been evacuated, so she's the only one there. Everyone on the crew is gone. She's all alone. And there's a moment you see here where she almost invites the loneliness in, the death that she's sort of carried with her, and wondering, does living even matter anymore? And anyone who's ever experienced loss can relate, right? If you experience devastating loss, you know what it's like. Is it even worth going on? And the entire rest of the movie, after this moment, is her grabbing on to life and saying, yes, I want to live. I want to live. Life is worth living. And she's going to fight for it. So she navigates all these various challenges, and at one point even gets somewhere and talks to people on the ground and has this prayer moment, which is really spiritual and beautiful. A human moment unfolding in this drama that's up in, technically, the skies. Low oxygen, the force of gravity, which is why it's called gravity, her lack of flight experience, being all alone, the looming field of debris that's going to come racing towards her again. By all accounts, she is facing the end, but she fights. She reaches out and finds the strength within herself to keep going. Her life isn't over. She wants more life. And she ends up making it back to Earth again. Sorry to spoil it for you, but it's been over a decade. And the visual is stunning. You know, of course, the rocket lands in water as it often does. And so you see her crawling out of the water, almost this primordial ooze, like she is reborn. And I always describe the movie Gravity as a rebirth, as a resurrection movie, as a movie where she's faced with her own sense of holding on to death, the death of a loved one that she didn't think she would get past, and so she went through the motions, where she decides that life is actually worth living. And it's good to keep going, even if it's hard. I will face all the challenges that come towards me. Because as we know, life can bring us intentional or unintentional pain and cruelty. And so she reminds us to take a breath, to acknowledge the fact that we can be reborn, we can be resurrected, we can be renewed. Because we hear the story today and we know that the ending is good. We know that there's a resurrection coming, even though there's pain in the moment for Jesus. And for Jesus and for us, those sorts of pains and those sorts of moments and those sorts of trauma and those challenges can turn us into either softer or more caring people, or they can harden us and make us check out of the human experience altogether. Those are the moments, right? She could have either hardened her heart and been like, forget it all, and given up. Or she could have softened herself and been like, I'm going to try, even though it's hard. And we have these two moments, cruelty or compassion, right? Within us. Cruelty, will we tear ourselves apart from the world, from each other? Will we create dissension and division and meanness as we, kind of deal with our pain? Or will we become open and soft with compassion, move towards people in our pain. We're either more caring or we're more hardened at the end of a lot of these experiences. Because what I will say is apathy is also a form of internalized cruelty. Not caring is the first stop on the road towards cruelty, and we've seen it, right? Jesus experiences cruelty. Why? Because he's called king of the what? Jews. And it's mocking. It's not a good thing, right? They're not going, yay. They're not giving him a crown in a ceremony, right? They dehumanize him. They treat him like the other. Because they have experienced trauma too, probably, and they have ripped themselves from their own humanity. And so dehumanizing the other becomes the norm of the day in environments that justify intentional cruelty. Life is challenging. But again, how we respond to those challenges is what matters most, whether it's 1925 or 2025 or the year 25, right? Compassion is our option. Facing pain, but not letting it take our kindness and our humanity from us, forgiving them, whoever they are. Jesus again says, you will be with me always. That is how he responds. Forgive them, you will be with me in paradise. There's something better waiting. Jesus' death was not merely a sacrifice for our amorphous or overall state of being sinful. I know that we talk about it that way. We pray a prayer sometimes, which is great. But the way Jesus died is more powerful and profound than that. In Jesus' death, he shows us how to live best. In this moment, we are confronted by what it means to truly embrace life, even in its pain, by seeing everyone as beloved children of God, creating connections of care and community, right? So Jesus is confronted and in pain, and in this moment, not like in the movie where maybe I can't go on. And what does he choose to do? He says two things: forgive them and join me in paradise. Forgive them. I'm going to release the cruelty that's theirs, and it's not going to take me on anymore. And secondly, you're going to be with me in paradise. There's a greater connection I'm going to remind you of. Forgive them and join me in paradise. In his death, Jesus showed us how to live, I believe, speaking gentle care and seeing everyone as neighbors worthy of belonging and love. So Christianity, in my opinion, isn't about necessarily who's in or who's out, or simply a litmus test of our theology. The way of Jesus is the way of compassion, the way of neighborly love and service, the way of belonging and belovedness. And as we've encountered what our legacy might be this stewardship season, my hope is that we continue to be a place of generosity, which we are. Today I had to open the door over there because you were bringing in so many things, whether it's for Marion Park, whether it's for the local food pantries. You're so generous. And I think that's an amazing legacy. And so will we have that legacy moving forward, a legacy of compassion and love and kindness? So I pray that as we end this sermon series and enter into Advent, that the prophetic truth that Jesus was trying to tell us in all of his words and deeds, that living in our own lives, what the world needs now is more compassion, more care, more empathy, and more goodness. So as we continue on in this series, as we go towards Advent, let us be reminded of Jesus' legacy for us, that we can make choices every day. And my hope is that we choose to live with compassion, that we see people as beloved, that we see people as our neighbor, and that we care about them as much as we care about ourselves. For that is the way of Jesus, the prophetic truth of God's goodness and grace seen in every action that we take and every prayer that we pray. That's what the world needs now. May we be those for everyone. May it be so. Amen.